All right, so in our studies of Native Americans, we've looked at several things, right? We did talk about what we knew, what we wanted to know about our Native American friends. We did talk quite a bit about how the state of California is broken up into regions, right? Four specifically. We have the coastal region, valley region, mountain region, and the desert regions, right? And now we are talking more in-depthly about the resources that our Native American friends have used. They live off the land. They do everything for themselves. They forage, they hunt, they gather, they use the resources around them to build shelters, to cook food, to make weapons. Everything they do for themselves. Remember, we did talk quite a bit about how, for example, if they need something, they're not going to be running to Safeway or Home Depot. If they're hungry, they're going to go out and kill something or cook something. If they need a tool, they're going to go out and find some rock and build it, or trees, or whatever it is that they need. So we're going to continue those discussions today about natural resources that Native Americans use to survive. So when we did talk about those first two sections, the animals section, first of all, that was the one in orange to refresh your memory. So we talked about how our Native American friends use animals. Remember that nothing goes to waste. So we did talk about how after they kill an animal, they will skin it. They will use the skin for blankets and clothing. They will use the bones, and they will use those bones to make tools. They will use antlers from deer, for example, to cook with. They will use the feathers from birds or fowl, right? F-O-W-L, waterfowl, that they kill for decoration. We talked specifically about headpieces and what those headpieces mean for the community members, the tribe members. And we talked about sinew and how they used that for the bows of the bows and arrows. Remember, the sinew is the tendons from the animals, the stretchy pieces of tendon that they will use as part of the bow so they can release an arrow and kill animals that they need to survive. And then we did talk about trees and plants, and there are many. We talked about how they used the wood, not only for shelters, not only to live in, but they also used it for canoes, for transportation. They hollowed out the trunks of trees and used those to float on water. They also talked about wood for weapons. They used wood for weapons. And the bark of the tree, and we did describe the bark of the tree as being the part on the trunk of the tree that kind of chips off. It's that wood that chips off and generally falls to the ground. They used bark and they wove it into not only clothing, but baskets. They used it for baskets. And they also talked about how there were some plants that were used for medicine. And I believe I used the example of an aloe vera plant, for example. There are a lot of plants that have medicinal quality, and our Native American friends were very good about finding that and using that to help heal their tribe members.
Healing.
And so we also talked quite a bit about acorns. Acorns is what we call a staple in the Native American diet. They used acorns daily, multiple times a day. And they used a tool, well, actually, two tools put together, what we call mortar and pestle. Mortar and pestle is a Native American way of saying it's a stone bowl with a kind of fat, short stone stick. They would put the acorns in and they would grind the acorns up in using the mortar and pestle so that they could eat. so they could cook. Okay. So now today we are going to be going over the other side of this pictorial. We are going to specifically talk about rocks and minerals and shellfish. Rocks and minerals and shellfish. All right, so all of you should have in front of you your pictorial for natural resources so that we can continue on and finish up this particular pictorial. Now, in a moment, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bring it up and we are going to talk about it. All right, so give me just one moment to do that. All right, friends, so bringing your attention to the right side of the pictorial, you can see where my bouncer is kind of bouncing around right now. It is in purple. So you can see under rocks and minerals, there are several things that are notable. The first one, that first hyphen right there, we call that a hyphen. They used soapstone for washing. They used soapstone for washing. So remember I gave you the homework assignment, if you will, about just thinking about when you were eating a meal, for example, thinking about what our Native American friends would have been doing in that same situation. Where would they be sitting? What would they be eating from? What would they be using as utensils? What would they use to clean up after themselves? Soapstone was one of those things. So for example, friends, we use our soap and water and sponges, for example. Our Native American friends used soapstone for most everything. And so underneath soapstone, of course, we just talked about that a little bit more. They used stones for mortar and pestle. And I realize it's been cut off. The spelling is M-O-R-T-A-R. M-O-R-T-A-R. Mortar and pestle, P-E-S-T-L-E. And again, you can see that picture to the left. I included that there purposely. That is actual mortar and pestle. So as our Native American friends gathered the acorns to use, they would have to crush them. So they would use this mortar and pestle to do just that. And underneath the mortar and pestle is what we call obsidian, O-B-S-I-D-I-A-N, obsidian. And that was a particular type of rock that they used for knives and arrowheads. Very sharp, very hard rock. And that was primarily used for knives and for weapons. And turquoise was something that was very prominent, still is, in Native American culture. Turquoise, I don't know how many of you have seen it. It is a blue, it's like a blue with black flecks in it. It's a very beautiful stone that is used for decoration and for jewelry. How many of you, show of hands, have seen turquoise jewelry? Yeah, a number of you. Turquoise jewelry is absolutely beautiful. So again, with rocks and minerals, soapstone for washing, for cleaning, and then stones for mortar and pestle, which was primarily for acorns, obsidian for knives and arrowheads, for weapons, and then turquoise for decoration and for jewelry. Adon, you had a question?
You know the arrowhead that I showed you yesterday? I actually had an obsidian one too, but I couldn't find it.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow. So Adon, if you do happen to find it, that would be awesome to share with the class. Let me know if you run across it. Okay. So friends, we're also going to go down to, it's the blue section on your pictorial, shellfish. Shellfish. So shellfish had a number of uses. So of course it was used for food. It was used for food. So specifically clams, mussels, and not mussels like, you know, like you flex your muscles, right? Mussels, mussels. It is a type of shellfish. And then abalone. Abalone. It looks like abalone in spelling, right? It is actually pronounced abalone. Again, another type of shellfish, all used for food. Clams, mussels, and abalone. And of course, again, keeping in the spirit of not wasting anything. These shells from the shellfish, and you can see that there is a picture to the left there. The shells were used as money for trade. The shells had value. So after eating the fish inside, they would use the shells for trade, for money, or for, you might hear it called, currency. Okay. And of course, they could also take those shells and string them, put them on strings and use those for jewelry. Used as jewelry. And if these shells were big enough and strong enough, they would use them for digging. Digging where? Well, it would depend on where they lived, what region, right? Could be in sand primarily, right? Because the shellfish come from the ocean primarily, right? So you would see a lot of this in the coastal region. The coastal region, our Native American friends in the coastal region would have very real access to this shellfish and the shells for digging. All right, so again, taking a look at your pictorial, the natural resources. By natural, we mean, of course, what's found around them on the land. Animals, trees and plants, rocks and minerals, and shellfish. Friends, we are going to be coming together for any last minute questions, and then I am going to place you into your breakout groups, and you are going to have to come up with a list of what you've learned with this pictorial. I'm going to give you just another minute or so to complete it, and then we're going to come back together.